Last week I mentioned to you that any candidate for Messiah that appears before the people of Israel saying that the law of Moses is over, that it was only until a certain time. And now that God has placed something different, it could be the anti-Messiah, but never the Messiah of Israel. If Yeshua, heaven forbid, had said that the law and the prophets were until John, as most non-Jewish modern theologians claim, right there, he would have been disqualified from being the Messiah because he would become an antinomy, an anti-Messiah. And if Rabbi Saul of Tarsus, in the name of Yeshua, would have taught that Israel was replaced by another people, there he would have disqualified his own master as the potential Mashiach ben David we all await. Contrary to that, Rabbi Saul talks about an evil one rising up. At the end of the days, leading a movement who will precisely teach all these wrong theologies. And Rabbi Saul identifies the evil one which will rise in the last days, like that system that will try to replace the law of Moses with a different one. Let's listen. Let's listen again to Rabbi Shaul as he describes it in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 3 regarding the time of the revelation of Mashiach ben David. Rabbi Shaul says,
Mashiach ben David has not arrived yet.
That's the context. Don't get confused. He says, don't let anyone be troubled, not even by those who fake my signature, sending them letters as if they were mine to support the false idea that Mashiach ben David has arrived. Mashiach ben David, says Rabbi Saul, has not arrived. Then comes the famous text from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 3, which says the following. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, because Mashiach ben David will not come unless let apostasy come, and the wicked man, the lawless man, the son of perdition be revealed.
Observe here, we are talking about a man of evil
that will have to appear before the unveiling of the Mashiach ben David. And in the Greek text of this letter from Rabbi Saul, it says anthropos. Anthropos tes anomias. That is the Greek text. Anthropos tes anomias, the Antichrist. Who then is the anti-Messiah? How does the Greek text identify this wicked man, this wicked person? The Greek text here is very interesting because it says, Ho anthropos tes anomias. Ho anthropos tes anomias. What does anomias mean in Greek? I'm going to explain it so we can better understand it. Possibly we are going to talk about a word that everyone knows in the 21st century, atom. Let's think about that word, atom. The term atom comes from Greek as well, where the prefix a means without, antomon means to divide. Therefore, atom is what cannot be divided without division. What can't be cut further. The point I want to make is that in the Greek language, any word that is preceded by the prefix
a, without, just like in Hebrew.
Ein means precisely a denial of something. I remember studying New Testament Greek for 4 years. The being of what I'm talking about, in other words, this Greek language, the prefix a is a negation prefix. Whatever comes after that prefix will always be a negation, meaning the opposite of, what follows that prefix. So, anomos, in Greek, anomos means without Torah. Without Torah. So anomias comes from anomos. Without Torah. Someone who denies the Torah,
One who says the Torah doesn't count, doesn't matter, doesn't exist, that it has been replaced. So, what is an anthropos anomos?
An anthropos anomos means a man who opposes the Torah.
A man who goes against the Torah. One who denies the validity of the Torah.
One that announces that the Torah has been replaced and that therefore Israel, the people of the Torah, have been replaced by another people.
That was said a generation after Yeshua, in the 1st century. So according to Rabbi Saul, before the appearance of Messiah ben David, someone will arise. There will be a system created that's going to deny the Torah.
Monomos, no Torah, no law of Moses, no more lay.
That was only until.
One moment, some more.
Now, with the arrival of John the Baptist, the law ended, and God has established something new, grace. Of course, by replacing the Torah with something else. You also replace the people of the Torah, to whom the Davidic promise and the promise of the land has been given, so that the wicked one that will rise before the revelation of Mashiach ben David, it will be a system that will teach the world that Israel has been replaced by another people, that they are now the true Israel, and that the Torah has been taken away by a new law, replaced by a new law. Rabbi Saul says that whoever teaches this is the anti-Messiah, the wicked man, the denier of the Torah. Now I want to ask you that question. Look at history. Who are the ones who taught you that Israel killed Christ and has been rejected by God and replaced by another people? Who taught you that the law was only until John, and that now there is a new dispensation that has replaced the law and the Torah with something else? Who are the ones who have taught you that when the prophet Isaiah says this prophecy is for Jacob and for Israel, he means something else? Who taught you that the 144,000 sealed from the 12 Israeli tribes, they are not Jews, but another ethnicity, another people? My friends, without realizing it, the fathers of the church, 2 centuries after Jesus, and those who were later dragged along by that same theology for their incorrect translations of the Hebrew scriptures, especially these 3 texts that I mentioned, have made Jesus an anti-Messiah figure in the eyes of Israel, totally unacceptable for the Jewish people. Think about how serious this is. The Jesus presented by Christian theology to the Jewish people, it is a figure of antimesis, one who annulled the Torah, who declared the Torah no longer normative, no longer binding for Israel, who is a false Messiah, according to Jewish theology of Rabbi Saul. Who is the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist for the Jewish people? One that denies the Torah. And one of the strongest candidates is precisely the Jesus created by Christian theology. Why? Because it has been that misguided Christian theology which taught that Jesus annulled the law. Is it an erroneous theology that has taught the world that Jesus annulled the laws of kashrut?
That Jesus made all foods clean, so now he went to eat everything, that Jesus replaced the Jewish Shabbat for the Christian Sunday, that Jesus replaced Israel with the church, that Jesus replaced the law of Moses by the New Testament, etc., etc. It's about this created Jesus.
Theologically created, which has nothing to do with the ethnic, historical Jewish Yeshua, which Maimonides, for example, in the 10th century, later, 10 centuries later, by the end of the 11th century, after that 10 centuries later, thought that Jesus was responsible for leading Israel away from the Torah. Imagine that. In Jewish thought, due to these mistaken theologies, there exists the paradigm, a false paradigm, by the way, that Jesus was the one who led the people of Israel away from the Torah. And then came the big question posed by Maimonides in the 12th century, that great question that still resonates today, when in his work, The Guide for the Perplexed and the Laws of Mashiach, he wonders, could there be a greater stumbling block for Israel than Christianity? And my friends, this is one of the most imposing paradoxes and incongruities and paradoxes of history in the world of science, for not fully understanding the mechanics of the laws governing the movement of planets. There was a time when people believed the earth was flat and that everything revolved around it in space, until someone showed the fallacy of that belief. And finally now we have the proper knowledge of the authentic laws that govern the celestial bodies and the actual place that they occupy our beloved earth among them. So just like it has happened, my friends, with physical sciences, it has also happened with geological sciences. And one of the greatest paradoxes that require review for true theological science requires repair. Who can deny that Christians don't love Jesus? Who can deny that? Who can deny that Christians have not given their life for Jesus? And many would give it again if necessary. No one can question that. Christians love Jesus. Christians worship Jesus. And unintentionally, in total ignorance of Judaism, and from the Hebraic roots of Yeshua's sayings, and the apostolic writings of his students who came later, all of whom were Jews and spoke in Jewish terms about Jewish issues. The Christian that arose after the Jewish apostolic era, by misinterpreting those clear texts from the Hebrew scriptures, they have made a figure out of the Jesus that came from the ecumenical councils, an anti-Semitic, anti-Messiah, and antichrist character. Yeshua was too Jewish for the Christians who came from Roman paganism and Greek philosophy. He was too Jewish. It didn't fit within the cultural reality from the paganism of their days. They did not understand it. To better understand it, they culturally adapted him to that Roman pagan environment, and without even realizing it, they turned him not into a historical figure, but a mythological figure, very popular, but that didn't historically exist. And with so many words, my friends, Jesus became a Robin Hood. Robin Hood was an extraordinary figure from whom we can learn many things. Even we can learn beautiful things from Robin Hood, like the topic of bravery, like the topic of resistance, like someone who demanded social justice for the oppressed peasants of England in the Middle Ages, all of that. But we all know, everyone in the know, literate, knows that historically there was no person named Robin Hood. He's a legend that embodies an ideal, but is not a historical figure. Something similar happened with Yeshua. Jewish Yeshua was too Jewish for Christians. So what did they do? They transplanted him culturally. Oh, they made him more Roman, more Western. They sought to make it more understandable for pagans, more in line with Roman culture, more in line with Greek philosophy. And by doing so, they destroyed Jesus' history. And they created a myth, the theological Jesus, who resembles a philosopher more than a rabbi, who looks more like a Roman character than the Galilean Jew he was. All academic research regarding Yeshua's identity shows that
When a historical figure is taken out of their ethnic environment, out of their historical organic context,
a myth is created that has nothing to do with that original character. In other words, the historical Jesus is incompatible and very different from the beliefs that Roman Emperor Constantine later made official in the year 325. After the birth of Yeshua, and it continues, forming since then in the ecumenical councils that followed afterward. To cut a long story short, here is the greatest theological paradox of the centuries. A loving and passionately enamored people of Jesus turned him into an anomos, an anti-Messiah, an antichrist, a denier of the Torah. How do we explain this? How do we explain it?
All that for ignoring the Jewishness of Yeshua.
For ignoring the Jewishness of his Devarim, of his words, of his teachings, of his sayings for Israel. And then through his students, all of whom were originally Jewish for the rest of the world. Christian theology lost Moses for misunderstanding
The Devarim of Yeshua.
and his original Jewish students. Christian theology lost the Father due to a misinterpretation of the Son. And instead of showing Israel the true Messiah, it will show Israel an anti-Messiah. And my friends, this has to change. This theological paradigm must change. And this is the generation that this is not another, this is the generation whose time has come for this to change, and for this to change radically and forever and for good. All right, let's wrap this up then. Today's class by Vaetchanan, and I pleaded and begged for the second Parashá of this book of Moshe,
the fifth book of Moses that we are studying. This parasha is unique.
It is unique among all, right in the parasha where it is revealed and where it is affirmed. The greatest commandment of all, the greatest commandment of all, you carry it in your neshama from the day you're born. The fundamental pillar of Jewish faith of all times, from Abraham to Binu, the father of our nation, up to this very moment that I am talking to you in this class. It is about the Shema, the declaration of the unity and oneness of the Most High God of Israel. Twice a day, when we wake up and when we go to bed, all the Jewish of the world, we profess the Shema, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen, Israel, the Lord is our Elohim. The Lord is one. The Eternal is one. That means that He is one. Not two, not three, not 316. The Eternal One is one. Has been and will be the greatest theological foundation of Judaism. In fact, the biggest contribution of Judaism in the world. It's monotheism, that monotheism historically embodied in Jesus, our just and righteous Messiah. By the way, one day they asked the rabbi teacher, which is the greatest commandment of all? What was Yeshua's response? The greatest commandment of all is Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Not only said that, but also added, from this commandment, all other commandments hang. In other words, if you break this commandment, you damage the entire Torah. If you break this commandment, it's like breaking the entire Torah, because the entire Torah hangs, depends on, and works if the commandment of Shabbat is properly observed.
It is foundational.
It's what allows us to speak of unity and the uniqueness of the God of Israel. Unity means that there's just one. No, there can't be anything else. There's no one else but God. God has no brothers. God has no co-equal or co-eternal. It's a contradiction in terms.
HaShem is one and no one else.
Oneness means there is no person, no force. There is no creation independent of HaShem in the universe, independent from the God of Israel. He is the one and primary cause of all things, and all things exist through him. And so there is no doubt that the Shema means that Israel has one and only one Most High God. Yeshua himself affirmed in one of his prayers to the Father that they should know you, to have an intimate relationship with you, the one true Elohim. Only through Elohim. Observe the strength of those words, that have an intimate relationship with you, the only true Elohim. Therefore, says Rabbi Shaul, there is only one God, and only mediator between God and man, and it is Yeshua made man. And that is why you will hear Yeshua tell us in the book of Revelations, to the one who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of
My God, my God.
If the God of Yeshua is not your God, you have to seek him, because if the God of Yeshua is not your God, then you seriously have to reconsider today.
If the God of Yeshua is not your one
And the only God, then you know what? Today is the day to break with those theological paradigms
From the past, which have dragged you towards those strange theologies of Israel,
substitute for Israel, and that you can confess with Moshe Rabbeinu, that you can confess with Yeshua, and with all Israel, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
this principle from our Parashá, which is the great strength that our Parashá has, which is the greatness and power of that energy, that comes out of these sacred pages today. This is the strength I want to instill in your soul. Don't feel bad for having supported these wrong theologies of replacement until today. Don't feel bad. Don't you feel bad for having taken on an identity that doesn't belong to you? Do not feel bad for having believed all these teachings. Unknowingly, they have led you to be part of that man of sin, of that anti-Messiah, of that Antichrist mentioned by Rabbi Shaul. Like the man who denies the Torah, who is anti-Torah.
Do not feel bad about those things.
You are not to blame for that. You are a victim. You are a victim of those theologies. But today by understanding it, today by receiving this revelation, what I am telling you here, from this moment on, it becomes your personal responsibility. And if you have understood this message, if the word has reached your heart, I want to invite you today to give up all these misguided theologies. Do you renounce once and for all being part of the wicked man who denies the Torah, which goes against the Torah and is the very essence of the Antichrist? And you can confess with all the people of Israel, with Moses, with Yeshua, with the original apostles of Yeshua, the greatest creed of the entire Torah, of all history. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.